Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Abby.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Fletcher.
And today's story is about the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
And this week, I thought we would try something new.
Oh,
I thought we would put out a question.
interesting.
I wanted to sing the song.
Oh,
I don't want to be a Pharisee.
Pharisee?
I don't want to be a Pharisee.
Pharisee?
Because they're not fair, you see.
Oh, no.
I don't want to be a Pharisee.
wow.
I don't want to be
I think
a
we're-
Sadducee because they're so sad, you see. Yeah.
We might be up against copyright infringement there, so maybe
I'm
we
sure
need
that's
to
public
do a
domain
little
by now.
back.
Hopefully.
It's probably old.
Yeah, we're going to get copyright strike.
All right, we do have a question. As always, it's not anything new, even though I wanted to throw it out there as if
It's a new question, though.
It's a new question.
It is
We've
a new
never asked
question.
this question before.
No.
As is the case with any question that we've asked, we haven't asked them before. All right. Religious leaders. Often, as we read the Bible, the religious leaders are known for being legalistic in their beliefs and their traditions. And in light of that, our question is, if you had to enforce one Jewish law that all people would have to follow, what law would you choose?
And just for the record, there are like 600
Yeah,
plus different laws here, so
yeah.
just Google it.
Which were, and they were all in order to make sure that you didn't break the 10
Yeah.
Commandments.
So,
Interesting. But-
all right, Fletcher wanted to go first.
No,
so
go for it, Abby. I know you
I
had a
don't want
funny
to go
one.
first. Jay can go first.
All right. Well, mine is, I think it's relevant for our day and age. In Leviticus 11, verse 19, it says that you shouldn't eat a bat.
That's good.
And it's brought about a lot of trouble in our world as of late. So I would like to enforce that. And
my God.
Not
maybe
specifically kosher, just that.
bat. Well, there's a whole list of birds. Owls are on there as
Yeah.
well, and there's other
my.
birds that are.
But that's he wants to
seagulls,
enforce the
hawks.
bat.
But the bat in particular. Yep.
Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh.
I'm done with the ramifications of that one.
Oh my gosh.
That's it.
I can't. Oh my goodness. Okay.
All right, Abby, what's yours?
No, you can go next. I'm still laughing at that one.
You're still laughing at that one. All right, I'm going to have to go with mandatory circumcision for everybody,
Come on.
No.
Really?
just because that's what Paul got so angry about. And,
So you're bringing it back.
I'm bringing it back. No,
Oh my
I'm just
gosh.
going to rip out my New Testament and go
who needs the
against
New
Paul.
Testament? I'm just
Oh
going to go
my
with
gosh.
circumcision. It's what saves people. Don't listen to that.
I
Read
think
the
we're
New
going to talk
Testament.
about that one in a couple of weeks.
Circumcision.
No,
Oh
read
my gosh.
Galatians
Yeah.
Okay.
if you didn't get the joke.
I don't know about you, Fletcher.
You're
I don't
so
either.
gross.
Circumcision. We're bringing it back, people.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
We just lost 8 subscribers.
All 8.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I am going to pick not to withhold food or clothing from your wife.
Well,
Interesting. Do you have a passage for that, or is that one of the weird
Exodus.
added Exodus ones? Okay.
Exodus 21. Where did it go?
Abby, are you withheld food or clothes at
No,
home?
Josh likes to feed me
There you go.
all the time.
I wonder what.
But if he ever stops enjoying it, you're like, oh, you better.
I'd like to know,
You
is that just a blanket, no limits, whatever? If it's like 4 a.m. and your wife's like, I'd like a turkey soup, you gotta go
turkey
downstairs
And
and
do
like,
not
and whip
withhold
one
the
up
food
and-
from me.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good one. And if I had to pick a second one, it would be, and like a serious one, it would be the Sabbath. Because not enough people follow the Sabbath.
Sabbath.
It's
Yeah.
literally a lifesaver.
I thought about that. I thought about the years of Sabbath and the year of Jubilee as well.
Yes.
And, yeah.
There are some good
Well,
ones.
that's the year of Jubilee would be a good one, especially you consider
If
what it
you're
implies.
broke.
If you're broke or if you're in debt,
If
it's
you're-
a big,
Yeah.
it's a big equality maker.
major
It's
debt
true.
relief there. And
There you go. So here's your challenge.
stuff.
You have to go and look up all the 600 and whatever laws
Pharisaical rabbinic laws.
and
Yes,
pick which one you want to enforce. And then let us know.
yeah.
absolutely.
We'd love to hear. So you can.
Hopefully you choose some better ones than me.
I think.
anyway.
Oh yeah, yours wasn't good.
Our answers were good.
Yeah, Jay and mine were good.
Yeah.
They made sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yours makes no sense actually.
You should see Fletcher's face right now. He's just realizing how unsensical he is.
Please,
it's not.
please send us a better law than Fletcher's.
And
Something
if you-
that we can replace.
If you can
Fletcher's
find
with.
one, yeah,
If you can
right.
find one.
Good
I'm
luck.
sure you can. There's lots of good ones out there.
And of course, as always, we do encourage you to read the stories that we are looking at for yourselves to get the whole picture of what is going on. And today's story actually takes place in the Gospels, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the story is about the two leading Jewish sects of the day during the first century, and they are the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
The Sadducees.
As we were.
There's two
as we
D's. I
heard
couldn't
this
spell
morning.
it. I still can't spell it. I need autocorrect every time.
You're French,
Sadducees.
it's okay.
All right, so who were the Pharisees and the Sadducees? Well, the Pharisees believed that God controlled everything, and they believed that the Torah and the oral traditions had equal authority, meaning that the Bible that they had a great deal of authority, but the expounding on that by the rabbis and kind of
All
the
their
conversation,
traditions,
the
yeah.
traditions that added a bunch of. They even added laws to the laws that we talked about today. So there was like oral laws added on to the 613 other laws, which, yeah,
It's a little wild.
a little bit wild. They also believed that the spiritual realm existed. So they believed in angels and in demons, and that there is an afterlife and a resurrection. So they believed in like a soul and a bodily resurrection. The Sadducees, a little bit different in their views. They believed that God isn't necessarily involved in everyday life, and that the written law was the only authority, so they didn't add the authority to the oral traditions. And they didn't believe in a spiritual realm, as in no afterlife and no resurrection. That's why the song talks about them being sad.
Yeah, that's why they're sad. They
Yeah.
don't have God in their everyday life.
Yeah, but they were a little bit more socially elite. They focused on politics a little bit more than religion, and there was often a lot of wealth associated with being a Sadducee, and they held high positions like the chief priests and the high priest. And they were primarily in Jerusalem, focused around the temple, and they were a little bit more friendly with the Romans, which is kind of where we see that political, social elitism coming in. And so they were a little bit more okay with the influence of the Romans in that way. And the Pharisees, on the other hand, they were the sect of the people. They were mostly comprised of middle-class businessmen and synagogue leaders, but they focused on personal piety. They had...
Explain piety.
So, like a personal holiness, or a pursuit of holiness, but related specifically to doing following the rules
law,
and
yeah.
acting according to what.
And
the law
that
says.
entailed they had like 600 laws, right? That was
Right.
really ritualistic. They had certain cleanliness requirements. They had to do sacrifices and obeyed every single law to the letter to stay.
Including not withholding their food and clothing from their
Of
wife.
course.
Right.
I'm sure that wasn't a priority, though.
It
might not have been.
Yeah.
So the Pharisees emerged around 160 BC after the Maccabean revolt, which happened in between the Old and the New Testament. And they were kind of led by scribes and laymen in opposition to the Sadducees, who were led by, the high aristocrats, the wealthy people in the elite, like the high priests.
Yeah.
And they also emerged around the 2nd century, but we have a little bit less history on them since they really disappeared after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. We don't hear much about the Sadducees.
Right.
Whereas the Pharisees actually continued on and were really the founders of modern rabbinic Judaism. Today's story takes place, of course, in the 1st century. Jesus is alive, and he's teaching and preaching. But, of course, Israel is occupied by Rome and governed by Herod, like we talked about last week.
Yep.
And Jewish law is actually regulated by a council called the Sanhedrin, the Great Sanhedrin. And it's basically a group of 70 members and the high priest, and they're like the Supreme Court of all Jewish law.
Yeah.
They meet at the temple, and they're in charge of all the problems that Jewish people have with the religion, with the law. They go to the Sanhedrin to discuss.
Right. And it was made up of both. The Sadducees.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. So there's mostly Sadducees on the Sanhedrin. Like we said, they were more focused on power and politics. So they had more seats in the Sanhedrin. Mm-hmm. But Pharisees, because they had the might of the people, they had a couple seats in the Sanhedrin, and they had a little bit more sway because the people were on their side.
Yep.
All of today's stories take place in Jerusalem at the temple built by Herod, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, and in the house of the high priest, which, again, we're in Jerusalem, which is in Israel.
Modern day Israel, old Israel.
Modern Israel.
Always in the same place. Jerusalem's always been there, and hopefully always will.
Hey, just a reminder, if you are enjoying listening to the Story Fulfilled podcast, we would love it if you would like and share and leave a review in whatever platform you are listening to, because we believe that if you're enjoying it, someone else might enjoy it as well. So feel free to share the love.
So let's get into this story. So both of today's stories actually take place in Matthew chapter 22, and Jesus is freshly arrived into Jerusalem for the Passover. Mm-hmm. So if you remember back to Matthew 21, if you go read it, I recommend you do. Jesus has this triumphal entry, and he rides in on a donkey, and everybody's laying down the palm leaves, and everybody's worshiping and crying out, "Oh, Jesus is here, the Messiah is here." So Jesus is obviously this famous guy. He draws these massive crowds, and the religious leaders, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, don't like this. They don't want Jesus to draw attention to himself. Right. They don't want any political rivalries, and they don't want to draw the attention of Rome about rebellion.
Yeah, make them stop, they said.
Yes.
And I love Jesus' response, which was, even if they stop, even if they don't, the rocks will cry out, which is just awesome.
It's just, fantastic. So the religious leaders are nervous, and Jesus has actually called them out as being hypocrites and, as righteous, making fun of the Pharisees and just calling them out on what they've done wrong. So today's first story, it talks about the Pharisees sending out their disciples to try. The Sadducees. Pharisees. Yeah. Pharisees. They sound similar, apparently. Yeah. No, they don't. So the Pharisees send out their disciples and try to trap Jesus into saying something that'll get him in trouble, that'll get him arrested with the Romans. Yeah. So the Jews are actually divided on the question right now, should we pay taxes? Should we really isolate ourselves from the Romans, or should we be open to the Roman culture? Right. And this question of paying taxes has come up. So the Pharisees, of course, come up and say, "Oh, Jesus, you're a wise teacher. You're very impartial on the whole question. Who should we pay taxes to? Is it right to pay taxes?" And Jesus, calls them out, and he goes, "Your guys are trying to trap me, you hypocrites." Yeah. And then he goes, "Give me one of those coins." So he takes a coin, and he points at it. I'm pointing at it with my hands, but you can't see me. And he goes, "Whose face is on this coin, and whose name is on it?" And they go, "Well, it's Caesar's." And his brilliant answer is, "Give to Caesar that which is Caesar's, and give to God that which is God's." And it just says, it doesn't give what they said. It just says they were amazed at his answer, and they left. Right. They couldn't say anything against him, and they certainly couldn't arrest him for saying, "Pay your taxes."
I wonder, what did they think he was going to say?
I think they were hoping for something about rebellion, or we're going to go against Rome. And then, of course, the Romans can arrest him if he starts saying anti-Roman propaganda and, rebel against Caesar. Yep. Yeah. So they didn't catch him. He was wise and said the right answer. So this next story is actually the same day, and Jesus is approached by the Sadducees now. Mm-hmm. And they come up, "Oh, I'm so humble. I'm a Sadducee." And remember, they don't believe in the resurrection. And they come up and ask Jesus, if, let's say in the resurrection, if a woman has married a man and they don't have kids and the man dies, according to the Mosaic law, the woman has to remarry his brother in order to redeem the family, and they can have kids. But what happens if she gets married to the brother and then he dies, and then another brother and he dies and he dies? I think it's like 7 brothers. Right. In the resurrection, whose wife is she? Right. right? So they're trying to ask Jesus, in the resurrection, who's she going to be married to? She's been married 7 times. And of course, they don't believe in the resurrection. So they're just trying to trick Jesus into making something up or being wrong about the law.
Right.
And Jesus' answer is, you guys don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God. And then he says, when the dead rise, they will not be married or given into marriage. And then he also says, he defends the resurrection and going, and in the resurrection, God says, long after the death of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God said to Moses at the burning bush, he says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he basically says, God is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. And he's saying there is a resurrection, and the scriptures say so. You guys need to learn it.
Right. And God's saying that I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is saying that they haven't disappeared. They haven't ceased to exist. They are still present in something. I don't want to say the word alive because they're not alive, but they will be. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you remember back, the Sadducees basically believe when you die, and that's it. And Jesus is basically standing in direct opposition to that, saying, you guys need to learn the scriptures. This is not what they say.
Yeah.
Because they claim to be, of course, experts in believing in the scriptures. And so if you read the rest of the chapter of Matthew 22, it just keeps on going. And then the Pharisees approached him, and then the Sadducees approached him. And they ask him questions and questions and just try to stump him and try to trick him into saying something wrong or illegal against Rome to get him in trouble. But time after time, again and again, they fail, and he just leaves them speechless. And they eventually leave him alone because of it.
I want that superpower.
To be able to leave people, give such wise counsel as to leave people speechless. Absolutely.
Fletcher almost did with his answer.
Yeah, but that's not wise counsel.
That's not wise counsel.
So eventually, this is the kind of, they get fed up, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees kind of get together and form this plot to kill Jesus and to have him killed. Of course, they hired Judas, and they pay him money to go betray him.
But we'll talk about that.
But we can't talk about that today.
Week.
That's not today's story, but you know how it ends with Jesus' death, and the Pharisees
Fletcher.
the Pharisees and the Sadducees are the ones that start the coup, start the plot of Jesus' death.
Yeah.
There you go.
Holy cow.
With saying that, how does the story of the Pharisees and the Sadducees contribute to the rest of the fulfilling of the story of God throughout the Bible?
So when we think of, I guess, the religious leaders and what Judaism and what Israel had become by the time of Jesus, Jesus says often and constantly, you guys don't know the scriptures. Like, I have come to fulfill. I'm not trying to destroy them. I've come to fulfill them. This is what it actually says. And you guys are changing the law to man's law. I am trying to show you what God's law is. And Jesus comes in fulfillment of that. And all through his teachings, he just talks about, this is what God's law is, not what you guys have made it. It's not about having these 600 different laws that you have to follow to the letter. It's about your heart.
Yet at the same time, he actually makes them harder to follow.
Yeah.
Right? Like he says, it's not even about the action. It's about the heart attitude that leads to the action. And that's kind of the thrust of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, too, is he says to most likely the Sadducees in this setting, he says, you search the scriptures because in them you think that you have life, but all these scriptures testify to who I am. And so, like you said, like they are totally missing the point of the scriptures in ignoring who he is and what he has for them. Yeah. The interesting thing that he says as well about the Pharisees is that he says to his followers that you should have a righteousness that far exceeds the Pharisees, which I'm like, well, how is that possible?
Right. I think is it the somebody who asks Jesus, how do I be saved? And he says, unless you have a righteousness that exceeds the Pharisees, then you won't be saved.
And then also he has the interaction with the rich young ruler who thinks he's doing really well, and we don't know if he is one of these religious leaders or not, but he's wealthy and he seems to be pretty up on his righteousness, and he's like, all these laws I have followed. Now there's a few that Jesus leaves out. That's a sermon on its own. But at the end, he walks away sad because Jesus says, sell all of your possessions and give everything you have to the poor. And at the end, the disciples say, who then can inherit the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus says, with man it's impossible. And he says, you need me, essentially, is what he's saying, right? And so the fulfillment of the scripture and the fulfillment of the righteousness that we need in order to enter into the kingdom. And so we see that the Pharisees and the Sadducees get it wrong in missing who Jesus is, and we get it right when we begin a relationship with Jesus, when we resign ourselves to the reality that we cannot obtain the righteousness that is required, and that everything that we do needs to be to seek the presence of Jesus.
To sum that up, I guess you'd say that the Pharisees, they tried to attain righteousness through the law, and then Jesus comes and says, the law isn't enough.
Right.
This is how you attain righteousness, and it's through me.
Yeah.
And then the Sadducees essentially almost gave up on the law and tried to seek political power and gave up on the power of God and said, I can do this on my own. And Jesus is like, well, no, there is power. God is the power, and there will be a resurrection, and it is through me, not through whatever political you can gain through Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't miss it.
Yeah.
Don't miss it.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thanks for listening today. We hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening.
Bye for now.